Let me tell that United Nations was founded on 24th October 1945. However, earlier it was known by League of Nations that was subjectified in the year 1920 as after the occurrence of World War. The major agenda of United Nations after World War II was towards the peacekeeping and security. Peacekeeping has proven to be one of the most effective tools available to United Nations to assist countries to navigate the difficult path from conflict to peace. With the current scenario, we have 12 United Nations peacekeeping operations currently deployed, and there have been a total of 71 deployed since 1948. However, why to ignore the second side of the coin? The United Nations has been ineffective in recent years because of the structure of the Security Council, lack of involvement in important global situations, and the different priorities between its actors. Also, how can we forget about the veto powers that are being shared with the superpowers of the world? Now, I leave this question on our delegates of today for answer that by the end of session that is UN justified in proving its agenda and efficacy at the current scenario? Passing the mic over to Tavishi. Thank you.
Anushka, I think that Taveshi is facing some network issues. So, sir, I request you to please enlighten us with some of your words.
On this topic. All right, thank you very much for inviting me. United Nations, as we all know, is a hostess to. I'm using a strong word, but that accurately defines the United Nations. It is a hostess to. Uh, we can call the superpowers or the big powers because, as you know, Security Council is dominated by the big five, right? So it is a kind of a structured inequality in international relations, one can say. United Nations represents the structured inequality in the international relations because there are 190 odd nation states in the world, but these five decide. That means the inequality has been legitimized. So, to that extent, the next question that comes to our mind whether United Nations has actually transcended the nationalism or the nation states. Again, a big no. The nationalism nation states, they are very much alive and kicking, I would say, very much thriving in this world. And nationalism has, I mean, people have philosophers, political thinkers, journalists, theorists, all of them have railed against nationalism. All of them have, many of them have praised nationalism, heaped accolades on nationalism. So nationalism is a contentious issue, but the point is that nationalism has not been transcended. No matter what we think about globalization, about having a world government, that is of course a pie in the sky, but having a world government or having, I mean, globalization, these are all to a large extent unrealized ambitions of mankind. Nationalism, nation state, very much part and parcel, very much the dominant theme in world politics. Look at Brexit, look at the Trump era, America first. Brexit shows the nationalism. I mean, European Union was definitely a step towards an entity which would transcend, which would go beyond nation state. But look at Britain. I mean, it has come out of it. Although the referendum, as you know, was neck and neck. The referendum was neck and neck, but still Britain went out of it. So what does it prove? It proves that it is not internationalism, it is nationalism which is the most important thing, even in today's world, so-called globalized world. Um, Definitely, I mean, international trade has burgeoned. Definitely, the climate change has forced the nation states to, I mean, cooperate with each other. Um, Once upon a time, the acid rain, I don't know whether you people have heard of it or not. That used to be a big international problem. Nation states did cooperate, but it is the nation states which cooperated. There was no international fora, not even the United Nations was able to solve it. And look at the recent wars, America's war against Iraq and Afghanistan. It was, America and Britain, they took the mandate from Security Council, but it was basically Bush and Blair's war against Iraq. And as you know, till now they have not found where are the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That was the main aim of the war. Afghanistan war, to an extent, the war itself can be justified because, Bin Laden and others were there. But still, and look at the way the United States, in fact, evicted itself from Afghanistan in August. So the United Nations has been able to function only when the big powers have let it function. So I personally feel that this idea of nationalism is so strong. I mean, it has proved to be stronger than communism, stronger than other ideologies. So the idea of nation state or nationalism has become so strong, and it is going from strength to strength. And ultimately, the best way forward for kind of a for a kind of a world government, if at all that is possible, that looks hopelessly idealistic at the moment. But if at all it would be possible, it has to be routed through the nation state and nationalism. So there cannot be any ignoring of the nationalism and nation state. And that way, I'm not saying that nationalism has been all good. No. We all are aware of the pitfalls of nationalism. And many people, many philosophers have very rightly, my students will get bored, but I have been saying this for a long time, but still it bears repeating. Many philosophers, many thinkers have rightly made a distinction between nationalism and patriotism. Nationalism is a very exclusivist idea, excludes others, because the way we define nationalism, unfortunately, has been derived from, let's say, the Western concept of nation, which is basically cultural homogeneity. It believes that there has to be a homogeneous culture. Look at France, archetypal nation. Look at Germany. Look at England. Look at UK. Look at say USA. I mean, one language, one religion, doesn't matter. I mean, there would be many churches within that religion, but one language, one religion, homogeneous culture. Traditionally, people differentiated between civic and ethnic nationalism between French and German, but it all boils down to cultural homogeneity. Hence, it excludes. That is my main point. So nationalism excludes, whereas patriotism is something that includes all the groups that remain within a geographical landmass. So I'm very much aware of the pitfalls of nationalism, the negative sides of nationalism, but unfortunately, as the things stand today, there is no going beyond or transcending nationalism. I'll end here. I did not talk much about United Nations, but the word nation, in fact, struck me there. All right. So, who is the anchor? Where is the anchor? Switch on your video.
I wish you are
Yes.
able to see it as anchors we are present over here.
Yeah, Anusha. Yes. Go ahead.
Yes. So first of all, sir, it's an immense pleasure, more of an honor. It's a blessed to have you with us and getting over the knowledge from you. Like as a student, we only think from one perspective, but as a teacher, you open our spectra to know the more and widen our knowledge in all the spheres. So first of all, that's an honor and privilege that I'm sharing the stage with you today. Also, to our audience, it is like as our one of students face the network issue. So sorry to take your time as we could not introduce to you our chief guest of the day. So we have Dr. DP Nanda sir, the assistant professor at Deshbandhu College of Political Science Department. Sir, I hope like from your thoughts, we had a path of guidance and for today's discussion. So I end my words here and passing over to Aditi.
Thank you, Anushka. On the behalf of Real Politic Minds, I extend a wholeheartedly vote of thanks to our chief guest, Dr. D.P. Nanda, who spared his time from his busiest schedule to grace our event. Today, we had an opportunity to listen to your valuable thoughts, which will surely encourage us and help our participants to have a fruitful debate come discussion session. Now, all the participants are requested to put forward their questions.
Hello, sir. I am Vaibhav Mishra from Gautam Buddha University, and I have a question that when the Iran nuclear deal, which has happened in 2015, and that is JCPOA, but it has failed during the time of Donald Trump. So, sir, we can say that it is the hegemony of one country that pull out all the P5+1 countries from that deal, and today Iran is going to make the nuclear bombs, which is harmful for whole humanities, because we have seen that they are not responsible. They help the Hezbollah in Lebanon. They help the Philistine in the Gaza, where terrorists attack to Israel, and they also threat the Saudi Arabia sometimes. So, sir, we can say that the United Nations is not working properly.
Bhargav, in international relations, we do not actually look at it from completely black and white perspective. There are in between there are gray shades. Iran. Yes, you're right. Iranian regime, the Shia regime in Iran has been helping terrorists, definitely. No denying that. Nobody can, run away from that fact. And the nuclear bomb, in fact, proliferation of nuclear weapons is a danger. But look at it from the other side. Which is the only country which has dropped a nuclear bomb till now? It is the United States. They claim themselves to be very civilized, Western civilization. In fact, I must tell you here, once Mahatma Gandhi was asked, what do you think of the Western civilization? Do you know what is the answer Gandhi gave? Gandhi said, that's a good question. Gandhi thought West is not a civilization. Iran, definitely, I agree with you. Iran's nuclear bomb is going to be an additional problem for the humankind, definitely. But how to ensure that they do not do that? The West must engage with Iran, not just impose punitive sanctions on Iran, but they must engage with that, with the regime, and do not think of changing the regime. Regime change is something which, no nationalist, and Iranians are quite nationalists. They love their nation state. So they would not tolerate that. So it is better to be engaged with that and stop them from enriching uranium. They have already enriched uranium, but I think the West has a lot to do with that. And secondly, coming back to the Palestine question, I think, it is a genuine thing. The Palestinians also have a right to have their independent sovereign state. Why not? If Israel could have its independent state in 1949, if I'm not mistaken, 1949 or 1948, around the time India got independence, then why not Palestine? Why deny them? And who has denied them? It is basically the Anglo-American regimes. That is one of the major reasons why there has been a lot of unrest in what the Britisher and Americans call Middle East. From India, we call that, as you know, West Asia. One of the major problems of West Asia is this unfinished business of Palestine. I'm not for a moment saying that the Palestinians are helped by the Arab countries. Although they are their Arab brothers, even Jordan and Syria have not been very helpful for them. But the fact remains that they definitely need a state. Coming back to the nuclear weapons, please remember, what is India's major problem with nuclear weapons? Do you know this? That India's major problem is that Pakistan is deploying what is called theatrical nuclear weapons. The theater nuclear weapons means as opposed to the strategic nuclear weapons. Strategic is basically, as you know, the ICBMs. Strategic basically means long term, long distance, right? Strategy. As opposed to that, tactical weapons. Tactics versus strategy, as you know. So Pakistan has been deploying tactical weapons. And if that is a big problem for Indian, the think tank, Indian government and others, because tactical weapons would be very difficult to counter, because if, there is a tactical weapon, if India goes in for a tactical weapon thing, say to Lahore, Amritsar would also be affected. So these are the major, practical problems that are there in nuclear weapons. But morally, nuclear weapon is horrible. That cannot be supported under any circumstances. But as I told you, the nationalism, in fact, is the driving force. So every nation state wants to have a nuclear weapon. Basically, it was couched in civilizational terms that if the Christians have nuclear weapons, Buddhists have nuclear weapons, why not Hindus? Why not Muslims? This is a dangerous, dangerous kind of argument, which only leads to proliferation, and proliferation is definitely is a bad thing.
Sir, one more question. Does the UN sanction help the other countries to, like in Myanmar, there is a dictatorship of army. So the UN sanction does help the Myanmar so that he can establish the democratic government. There is rule of armies there.
Myanmar,
destroy the economy of the country and provide the poverty, but does not affect the government.
you're right. It actually does not, in any way, even in small measure, it is not affecting. That's because most of these Western countries are paying lip service towards Myanmar, and look at Rohingyas. What is happening to them? They have been driven out of Myanmar, and some of them are have settled down in Bangladesh, and Bangladesh says that it is in no position to it is a poor country and no position to, I mean, allow them to settle permanently within Bangladesh. India, the current dispensation sees everything in Hindu-Muslim lanes. So obviously Rohingyas are Muslims, so the current government is not very favorable to the Rohingyas. So Myanmar, but the complexity is that even Aung San Suu Kyi has fallen short of calling a spade in the sense she has not very clearly said that whatever these groups and government did to Rohingyas was bad. She never said that. So, but democratic form of government, yes, it should come to Myanmar, but I do not think the United Nations can do anything about it. It has to, if at all it has to come from within. It cannot be a sanction from without. That means from outside. Vaibhav, did I answer your question?
Thank you, sir. But I am asking of the how
Vaibhav,
these sanctions does not
I
affect
think
the government of
others are also
UK.
waiting for the question. We are short of time. So, Sakshi,
Sir,
next
I'm
issue.
sorry to interrupt. We know Vaibhav, you will get the answer you want maybe in our forward as we move forward towards our session. Also, sir, concluding what you said as answer, just a line to through my way of thoughts is that peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. Also, do not let the behaviors of others to destroy the inner peace that you were explaining. That atomic bombs are not at all a good sign of peace. So moving forward, if anyone have any kind of question, you can ask to sir related to our
Good
today's
afternoon,
topic.
sir. I'm Sakshi from Kalindi College, and I have a question. Like you rightly pointed out towards the domination of five major countries in UN. So, how we as Indians or India as a developing country can make UN more accountable and can have a say in it?
How, I didn't get your question, Sakshi. How India?
As a country, as a developing country, can make more accountability in UN, can take more, can increase its participation in UN,
I mean,
and have a say in decision making of
how
United States.
India can make its presence felt in the UN, you
Yeah.
mean to
Yes,
say?
sir. Yes, sir. Representation of India.
India has, in fact, although India, way back in the 1950s, when there was this Korean War going on, India was a very poor country at that time. But Jawaharlal Nehru was accorded he wielded a lot of international prestige because he was instrumental, along with Nasser and others, to bring in the non-aligned movement and others. So India had a lot of prestige in that respect. So the point is that how India can be a great power. Obviously, one is the economic development, right? Economically, India has to progress. And when I'm saying economic development, I do not only mean the GDP growth. It is not just a gross domestic product. It has to be an equitable distribution of wealth. As you know, as we very often say, that distributive justice within Indian society. And secondly, India has to come or has to be seen as a country which is inclusive. Unfortunately, the present dispensation is not doing that. India is not being seen by outside world as an inclusive country. Inclusive means all the groups in all the collectivities, as we say in political science, they must feel part of this nation. You cannot demonize a group day in, day out and think that our